Call the meeting to order. Mr. Tramp will do the pledge, and Mr. Spula the invocation.
One moment, please. As we wait for my laptop to lock in, please let's just have a moment of silence for the victims and their families from Orlando. Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, bless those who are gathered here today to offer their thoughts and ideas for the good of our community. Please watch over our flag as we celebrate Flag Day, and ask your blessing for the Orlando victims and their families. We also ask that you grant all our citizens peace, prosperity, and well-being in their lives. Please instill in us the necessary integrity, perseverance, and wisdom to achieve an effective and successful meeting for the greater good and benefit of our citizens of Spotsylvania County. We ask this in Jesus' name, amen. Flag of the United States of America, republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's not exact, but that's it.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. First item, as always, is your consent agenda for June 14, 2016. Items included are as follows. First is approval of board minutes from May 10, 2016. Next is acceptance of an award from the Virginia Department of Fire Programs Regional Fire Services Training Facilities grant of $50,000. This will fund a flashover simulator with a FREM participating cost of $1,900, which is in budget. Next is appointment of Catherine Dennis to the CBRC for the Chancellor District, term expiring December 31st, 2019. Next is appointment of Jeremiah Hansen to the CBRC for the Livingston District, term expires 12/31/19. Next is approval of contracts for 3 firms to provide professional engineering design services for various transportation improvement projects. These are our standard form engineering contracts. This was robustly competed. There were 22 proposers, of which 3 were selected. Next is approval of contract renewal to Welch, Graham, and Ogden Insurance Company for property, liability, accident, and disability insurance services for our FREM personnel. The property and liability annual premium is $97,540. And the accident and disability annual premium is $113,227. And again, this is a benefit that we provide to our volunteers. Next is approval of contract renewal to Revere Gas, Inc. for delivered propane for county facilities. This is a second of 4 renewals available under the contract. Number 8 is a business property tax refund for Payne's Plumbing and Heating, the amount of $3,175.82. Next are capital projects, budget adjustments. There are a variety of adjustments that were detailed in your documentation, but overall it's a net reduction of $45,784 in the use of general fund capital projects fund balance, and a reduction of $19,276 in the use of utilities capital fund balance. Next is a commendation honoring the 100th birthday of Virginia Durrett, and her son Mason is present with us this evening, and upon completion of consent agenda we'll have a photo opportunity and I'll read the resolution. Item 11 is a commendation honoring Dr. Polino Sambat, who is also this year's winner of the Spotswood Award and will be honored with that presentation this Thursday evening at the Marshall Center. Item 12 is the FY 2017 revised school budget and associated appropriations as directed by the board on May 10th. This action will match the county and the school budgets. Item 13 is acceptance of a grant award for the Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program. This is for vehicle exhaust removal systems for our fire stations. Item 14 is reappointment of Arthur Snyder to the Transportation Committee for the Livingston District, a term expiring June 14 of 2017. Item 15, replacement of air compressor. This is an appropriation of an insurance payment on a claim that was approved to replace a unit. This is a insurance award from VACORP for $21,399.16. Item 16, resolution authorizing American Medical Response Mid-Atlantic, Inc. to operate ambulance service in Spotsylvania County as requested by Spotsylvania Regional Medical Center to provide transport for some of their patients. Item 17 is a request to submit a COPS hiring program grant application for one new entry-level deputy. This would be a school resource officer position for Lee Hill Elementary. And item 18 is reappointment of William Harrington to the Rappahannock EMS Council Board of Directors for term expiring June 30th, 2019, as requested by Supervisor Benton, and that is your consent agenda for today.
Mr. Skinner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to pull number 11, please.
Any other board members like to pull?
Sir, pull number 1 for a correction.
Number 1, any others? Okay, do we have a motion on the remainder?
Motion to approve.
Call the question.
Six yes, with Mr. Ross not present.
Mr. Yakubowski, would you like to talk about number
Yes,
1?
sir, thank you. In the minutes on page 8, the third set of votes down, the motion failed 3-4 with Benton, Cibolo, Ross, and Yakubowski opposed. And then under the vote, it has my name under an aye as opposed to a nay, if we can change that for the record. And that was all. Motion to approve that one.
Okay. With the change from
Change.
nay to aye, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion. Call the question.
Six yes.
Mr. Skinner, would you like to discuss number 11?
Thank you, sir. Yes, it really wasn't pulled for any other reason but to let the public know that this commendation that hopefully this board will pass was for Dr. Polino Sambat. He came to the U.S. From the Philippines and established his thriving medical practice in Spotsylvania County in 1972. He served county citizens for over 43 years, recently retiring at the age of 75, but continuing to give back through his volunteer medical practice at the Moss Free Clinic. In addition to providing medical care to the county citizen, he was the driving force in the establishment of the Spotsylvania Volunteer Rescue Squad, where he offered no-cost physicals for rescue volunteers and served as a medical advisor. Concurrently, he was working nights at Mary Washington Hospital as an attending physician and surgeon. Through this commendation, Dr. Sambat is honored for his dedication to the health and well-being of residents in this area, well known as both a valued physician and a friend throughout Spotsylvania County and the region. I believe he is also, as Mark said, the Spotswood award winning this year. And although he will be honored for that, the actual commendation, if passed, will be presented to him on June 24th to him at a very special ceremony reception being hosted by the Spotsylvania County Women's Club at the Marshall Center, Senior Center, and that's at 8800 Courthouse Road at 6:30 p.m. The public is invited for this. This is especially fitting as the Spotsylvania County Women's Club was instrumental in recruiting Dr. Sambat 43 years ago to come and serve our citizens following a 6-year void of having a physician in the county. So it is truly an honor to have a gentleman like that served our county so well and everybody. So I make a motion to approve, but I wanted to explain it to the public exactly what this was about. So motion to approve.
Okay. Call the question.
Six yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
And the next item, Mr. Chairman, was a photo opportunity with Mason Durrett, the son of Virginia Durrett, who we're honoring with a commendation on the occasion of her 100th birthday, which I would like to read for your record, if I may. Whereas Spotsylvania County resident Virginia Durrett, a delightful, engaging personality who remains a noteworthy source of Spotsylvania's heritage and is unofficially called Spotsylvania's historian, has just celebrated her 100th birthday. And whereas author and educator Virginia Durrett contributed to the Spotsylvania community for decades, teaching elementary school and also serving as librarian at Spotsylvania Junior High, and her numerous students now as adults continue to cite her profound influence on their lives. And whereas after her retirement, Virginia Durrett turned her mutual loves of Spotsylvania County and history into renowned publications to help preserve the county's identity. And whereas Virginia Durrett's Red Book, commonly known by the color of its cover, was the first and remains as one of the most complete documentations available on the historical sites within the county, having helped spur architectural surveys in Spotsylvania. And whereas Virginia Durrett has penned a dozen books on area people and places, including The World of Joseph Walker, a book which captures 19th century Spotsylvania life through the eyes of a man who, although born into slavery, eventually became one of the region's outstanding citizens. And whereas Virginia Durrett served on the county's Historic Preservation Commission, willingly participating in many county events, and in 2005 was selected to be the winner of the county's esteemed Governor Spotswood Award. Now, therefore, the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors commends and joins in recognition of the 100th birthday of our honored county citizen, Virginia Durrett, wishing her continued years of good health, happiness, and strength. And I would like to show the public, we have copies. Her son Mason brought us to display copies of a few of Ms. Durrett's works from generation to generation, and a history of Marie. And here is the publication on the life of Joseph Walker. The Red Book, I know, is a source used in our planning department regularly. And so this is a great occasion for us. And if you would, please step down before the dais for a photo. No, it was passed with the consent agenda. Mr. Durrett, would you step forward, please? That brings us, Mr. Chairman, to public presentations. Do we have anyone signed up? Amy?
Yes, sir.
I will then read the guidelines for public presentations, which are an opportunity for citizens to present matters you believe deserve the board's attention. These presentations are not part of a public hearing. Sign up to speak at each public hearing is separate. Public presentations are one-way comments from citizens to the Board of Supervisors. They are not a forum for dialogue or debate. To make a public presentation, please sign up on the provided sign-up sheet and print clearly. Come to the lectern when your name is called. Clearly state your name, address, and voting district for our record, and address your comments directly to the board. State whether you are speaking on your own behalf, in which case you'll be given 3 minutes to speak, or state if you are speaking on behalf of a group, in which case you'll have 5 minutes to speak. Public presentations shall not be used to address matters subject to public hearings or to make political campaign speeches, private advertisements, or personal attacks, and written comments to the Board of Supervisors are always welcome. Amy, who has signed up to speak?
The first speaker is Kevin Timangles, followed by Jackie Williams.
I have a tendency of talking loud, so I don't want to talk too loud. How you guys doing? My name is Kevin Timanglo. I live at 3956 Lewiston Road, Spotsylvania County. I'm here to talk about my daughter, Aprecia. She was involved in an accident March 25th, trying to cross the street to get on the school bus. She was struck by an SUV. She's slowly recovering right now. She's doing real good, actually. What I want to do is take advantage of my 3 minutes to thank a lot of people. I don't have a big list of names, so, a few people I want to call out. To start off, I do want to thank the whole Spotsylvania community. Since this happened, they've been very generous with their support, prayers. A lot of people dropping off dinners, just walking up to my front door here. I don't want your family to worry about anything but helping your daughter recover. I have to be honest. I'm from Alexandria, Virginia, so I thought I was living in a very cold world for a while, and to see the people that came out of the community to give a helping hand like that, it most definitely gave me a different outlook on the world as a whole, and most definitely as a community. I want to go on to thank Miss Foster and Mr. S. I can't say his name too good, but they're with Post Oak Middle School, the school that my daughter attends. While my daughter was in a hospital bed at VCU, Miss Foster herself called us at her direct phone from a hospital bed herself. More concerned about my daughter than being more concerned about herself. That's a big deal to me. It gives me a sense of security as a parent to know that my daughter attends such a school with very caring people. I've attended this school on a rally, and let me tell you, when I walked in that lunch cafeteria, man, they went nuts. I mean, just the sight of me, and I wish I could have had my daughter with me so she could have seen all the love and support that she got, because I don't think she realizes how much people care about her and know her in that school. Post Oak Middle School and A.G. Wright Middle School in Stafford, Virginia, they actually got together and did a fundraiser called Battle of the Schools. And one of the things was to see who could raise the most money for Aprecia, and of course the family to help us out through our needs. There's a lot of traveling back and forth to Richmond, appointments, so on and so forth. And the bet was whoever loses has to wear the other school's logo. So Post Oak Middle won, so represent for Spotsylvania County very well. That's really all I have to say. I don't want to point out anything. It was truly an accident, so there's no need to discuss anything there. Everything was going accordingly. It was just a bad day. Unfortunately, it happened the day before her birthday. But I most definitely wanted to take advantage of these 3 minutes and thank Spotsylvania County. Y'all have been real good. The community has been real good to us, very helpful. And I just want to thank everybody for their prayers and support for her, man. It means a lot to my family. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure everybody appreciates you coming forth and saying that.
Jackie Williams, followed by Catherine Dennis.
Good afternoon. I'm Jackie Williams. I live at 9410 Everett Court in the Berkeley District. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I would like to take this opportunity to commend the county staff for recently posting supervisors' travel expenses on their website. This action carries out a commitment by the Board of Supervisors for full transparency as voted back in February. Special thanks to Supervisor Sabula and Supervisor Yakubowski for being the first to have their travel expenses posted. Thank you.
Catherine Dennis.
My name is Catherine Dennis. I live at 7506 Chancellor Road in the Chancellor District, and I have lived there for over 40 years. And what I've come to ask the board to do today is to review the zoning ordinances about shooting in our county. This has been a particular problem in Chancellor for the last few months. Currently, if I understand it correctly, shooting is only prohibited in a subdivision. There is no minimum distance from a roadway, from an occupied dwelling, from a school. And in the last 4 to 5 months, we in Southern Chancellor, we've had problems with target practice, with high-powered rifles that goes on for hours. Sunday, it started at 8 a.m. and it finished at 11:30 p.m. This isn't without cost to us. Not only has it traumatized us and terrorized the children, we have suffered property damage from errant bullets. My barn has been hit by a .332 round. My neighbor's house has been hit. A gentleman was leaving the Salem Fields Food Lion when an errant bullet bounced off of his car. That was also a .332 round. The Sheriff's Department has been very helpful, but their hands are tied because of the ordinance. Most, but not all, and certainly I'm not saying this is the source of those rounds that have done property damage, has been a property on Ashby Drive that I've given you a copy of. Clearly, on this, it states that this is in a subdivision. Additionally, that particular property in 2012, $87,500 of our taxpayer funds were used to help purchase an open space agricultural easement, which I'm going to give to the clerk so she can make copies for you. I follow this board very carefully. I do not recall you approving the erection of a shooting range. And I ask you to please look at this and please consider making changes so that all of us can live here safely and happily. Thank you.
There are no other citizens signed up to speak.
Would anybody like to speak that did not sign up to speak? Sir?
Good afternoon. My name Tim Davis. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my wife, Laurel Fenster, 2110 Marengo Plantation Lane, Lees Hill District. What I want to speak about today is really reiterating. I have sent an email to the board, to the Planning Committee, and to the Transportation Committee regarding the Department of Rail Public Transportation Southeast high-speed rail proposals. My wife and I, about a month ago, received a letter in the mail saying that upwards to 100 different people, maybe not all of them, but some of them will be coming on our property to do an environmental assessment for a proposed freight train rail line that would go 200 feet from our house. So this is outside of the right-of-way existing for the rail line, cuts through Caroline and through Spotsylvania. And so needless to say, we were highly disturbed by this. We had not realized that this alternative was being considered. We have spoken to our neighbors. There are a lot of people who are very concerned about this. What we are seeking This is one of three alternatives that is being considered. This is the final stage. It will, this environmental survey is part of the final decision. Public comment is a factor in deciding this alternative. So there is no benefit that I can see to Spotsylvania County to have this rail line go through and essentially destroy the property value and the quality of life of many residents for the sake of sort of a potential quick fix for this high-speed rail rather than following existing right-of-way for the railway. So what we are seeking is a strong statement from the Board of Supervisors to the Department of Rail and Public Transportation, essentially saying that Spotsylvania County is opposed to this, this alternative, the eastern bypass option, because it would disrupt residents and it would not have a benefit to the county. So I am hopeful that the board will consider this matter. I don't know if this requires it to go on the agenda or not, but I am essentially requesting the board to take this matter and consider it and do that response. As far as we are concerned, there is no, there is no way to put this freight line in and not make it an incredible disadvantage to the people. There is no sound barriers or bridges or anything that could possibly change the fact that we're going to have 12 or more freight trains a day going 200 feet from our house. So I appreciate your consideration of this matter, and I will continue to email as things develop, and I am hopeful that we can get some sort of response from the county. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, Mr. Skinner.
Sir, I have a question. Would you mind, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk to you further about this.
Sure.
Okay, so I don't know if you want to do it over the public. I'd just like to get your telephone number so I can give you a call and talk over the
Sure,
phone.
absolutely.
Maybe we can meet.
I greatly appreciate that. Why don't I write it down and I'll give it.
If you give it to Amy, I appreciate it very much. And
I'd be
before
happy.
I go, one other thing, Mr. Sabula, we talked about something like this before, and you said you were going to be talking to and having a public hearing. Do you know if you've set that up yet, sir? Has that been set up for you?
Thank you, Mr. Skinner. I have spoken with the person at, can't remember the whole name, but it's the Railway and Department of Transportation. And I am working to have a public meeting, public information meeting set up so that we can have community interface with the officials, trying to set this up at our Marshall Center. I have not gotten a positive response as to a date yet, but they are considering and working to try and schedule a meeting like this. I've been overwhelmed with the same contacts as you have alluded to.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So one more thing before you go.
Yes.
Sorry, are you done? I was going to say, next Monday, it's 7:15 at the FAMPO meeting. That's a good opportunity to address your points that you just read, to read them to the FAMPO, which is the Regional Transportation Planning Organization. So a number of us will be there, as well as the other regional partners. And I think
DPRT.
they're usually there as well in attendance. Yeah, so that's a good one. It's downtown by the train station. I don't have the address, but if you look it up on the website, FAMPO.
Or if you go, sir, to the train station, and you're looking at it from, I guess, the south, it's right across the street.
Okay.
It's right across from the parking lot. You'll see it's an old brick building.
Okay. I
be
appreciate it.
able-
I will, I'll write down my information.
And please,
And we have to run to another Board of Supervisors meeting, so I don't think we'll be able to stay to the end. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak that has not already? Okay, seeing none. Go on to, is it VDOT report?
VDOT report, Sean Nelson, I believe, is here. And we have, at Mr. Sabula's request, put a copy of his report onto slides. We've not rehearsed this. We're working without a net, but I thought for the information of people watching on cable, I could try to follow Sean's comments with the slides that show the similar information, if I could have the floor computer.
I'll try to give you some cues too. Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm here for your monthly transportation briefing. First, I'll start with the Battlefield District and Mr. Yakubowski. I wanted to touch on some of the highlights from the last changes since the last time I was here. The project on Smith Station Road at 208 has started. The construction started on the 31st, and they're actually, the fixed completion date for that project is October 11th of 2016. The lane closures are permitted on that project Monday through Friday between the hours of 8:30 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. and 6:30 a.m. And we're also making sure that there are no traffic lane closures during school hours when the buses are coming and going. And we work with the schools this week because I guess there's some early dismissals that we need to catch. So the contractor has agreed to stay out of the road during those times.
Okay, and that's going to carry over to September?
Yes, whenever
Okay,
school's
good.
in session, we've worked it out with the contractor so they're not in the road when dismissal and entry in the morning.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the Berkeley District. On the construction part, the project at Route 1 and Mud Tavern Road is now completed, so that construction is now over with. I have no updates for the preliminary engineering portion, so if we can go to the inquiries portion of the Berkeley District. There we go. There was a request to review the intersection of Gabby Lane, which is a private road, and Marie Road. I had sent comments back to you and additional county staff on that on June 3rd. We've had a report of 2 crashes between January 2011 and 2015, and we feel there are multiple options that can help address this situation, but the property owner will likely need to work with the adjacent property owners on some of those issues. There was also a request to review a concern at 10231 Wallers Road. We met on site with that property owner on June 6th to discuss all the concerns. We will be doing a bridge rehab project out there on late in July, which will help some of those situations. We will be doing some drainage work and trying to address some of the site distance concerns that were brought up during that meeting while the road is closed during the bridge project. There was also a request to review various site distance issues due to high grass throughout your district. Our crews will be addressing those concerns over the next 2 weeks.
Thank you, Sean. I did want to make a statement here in assistance to VDOT, and you and I have had many discussions on this. I want to remind all residents, not just in my district, but in all the districts, that you have the option of dialing 1-800-4, that's F-O-R, ROAD, R-O-A-D, and speaking to the individuals who answer, and you get a number for the job, and you can call back in and follow up and see the status of it. That would relieve the various county supervisors, because we get these kinds of complaints, and it would help relieve Sean's workload because we've got a system in place. I think this is great. I've already had a couple of my constituents use this, and they appear to be satisfied. So thank you for all the coordination that you've been doing in Berkeley District.
No problem. And with that system, if people, they can get text alerts on when the work order changes and whatnot. So it's a good way of tracking work when they submit it in instead of just via email. Next, I will go to the Chancellor District, which is Mr. McLaughlin. I really don't have any updates on that except for the work on Orange Plank that we had done that safety study. We're going to work on trying to get that one in the queue. We're working on River Road now, so we'll work on that one after that.
I did talk to you a couple weeks ago about the horrible paving job on Route 3 in front of the new Chancellor 5.
Yes, that was a part of the permit job for the county's fire station. Our permit inspector is trying to get it rectified with the contractor to have that fixed.
We'll get it fixed.
Yeah.
Just one more follow-up, and it's kind of a partially Dave Ross and mine. Is there a there's always been some issues with the river entrance to the Riverbend High School along Route 3 and all that. I know there's been different proposals or different options. Do you have a list of all the things we've looked at in the past? Just
I have sent that. Well, I'm only been aware of the one. Our traffic engineer met with the schools and we came up with different proposals. And I've sent that to David and to county staff.
could you send me a copy of that? Just
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
All right. Next, Mr. Ross isn't here, but I'll still go over some of the inquiries from his district. There was a request to meet in Waverly Village regarding some drainage concerns. Our crew started working on some of that this week. There are some other issues that are out there that are outside of the right-of-way on drainage easement that will need to be addressed by other means. Next is the Lee Hill District, Mr. Skinner. I don't really have any updates, but there was a request for us to meet and talk about the signal at exit 126. So we need to figure out a potential time. I think my assistant had tried to call to contact you to meet on that on a morning.
I would ask then if he just leaves a message.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll get back with him. But I also saw that you saw the dedicated left turn lane from Spotsylvania Avenue onto Mine Road.
Mine Road.
You just had it on here.
Oh, yeah, that's the project.
That's the project. And just an update on that is, when do you have that plan to start?
Well, the advertising, we're trying to get the project awarded now, so we're hoping it's going to start this summer.
Okay. All right. And the other thing that I'd like what we talked about, and the only solution, and I'll say this right now so your engineers can talk to me or whatever, the problem is everybody's going northbound on southbound 1 when they get there. And on the other side, you have a light that's a flashing yellow. And if there's no cars going through, they have the right-of-way and backs everybody up on the turn. I think the only solution is, as long as I've got a green light on my side, they need to be stopped.
But you're saying the flashing yellow has the right-of-way, but the flashing yellow...
It does, because here's what happens. As I go on to northbound...
You're telling me at the yield.
I have a yield.
Yes.
So these people are just driving up. Even though I've got a green light up there, I've got to yield to the people coming. And if there's nobody stopping those people coming down, from...
If there's no traffic going
southbound, they have the right-of-way. And that gets backed up at 7:15. It was backed up all the way to the Shell station.
Okay.
And that causes a problem, because then when the Market Street goes green, people, they can't get across, and they can't do that. So honestly, the only way I see it is, as long as I got a green light there, they have to stop coming northbound on 1 to cross over to the north. It's just not, we can't, you're saying you don't want to back up on the northbound 1, but you've got a bigger backup on northbound 1 southbound.
Okay.
So like I said, I'll be out there. I think we can coordinate something probably. It seems like Wednesdays, not tomorrow, but next Wednesday would be a great day for us to go out and look at that at 7:15, or just show you what I'm doing. It happens even in the evening too. Even in the evening, as long as those people have no cars blocking them, they get right away, and that means we lose our green light, really, because we give way to all those people going on to 95 from the south.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
No problem.
Okay.
All right, next we'll move to the Livingston District, Mr. Benton. We had some recent inquiries regarding some places in your district. There was a request to look at a drainage concern along Smith Station Road between Hollybrook Drive and Cobblestone Drive. We went out and tried to address some of that previously, but the rest of the work is scheduled to be complete this week. There was a request to review drainage concerns at 10307 Piney Branch Road. We addressed those concerns on the 13th. There was also a request to review the condition of Parker Lane, which is a state-maintained unpaved road. We plan to have that road regraded by the 24th of this month. There was also a request to look at a tree limb along Post Oak Road. I was informed that tree limb was removed on June 6th. There was also a request to review the condition of the pavement on Sunnybrook Farm Road. We've patched those temporarily, but we'll have to go out and do some more permanent repairs as the schedule permits.
I just had one. I think at one point I'd mentioned to you Belmont and Days Bridge, that intersection there.
The site distance?
Yes.
Okay. I'll check to follow up if guys have got that or not.
I will tell you, having used it and using it regularly, fairly regularly, it's horrible.
Okay. I will see if we can get that rectified. All right, next I'll move to the Salem District, which is Dr. Trampy. I do have some updates on the Harrison Road project. The project started on May 2nd. The fixed completion date, I believe, is sometime in 2018, which I left that off. I will provide an update on that. The lane closures for that project will be happening during the off-peak hours, so most of the lane closures on that project will be at nighttime. And last but not least would be some of the maintenance concerns that the maintenance items. I provided a list in you all's report of some of the resurfacing work that is going on. Some of the subdivisions that we've got, which I'll just highlight, are like Saddlebrook subdivision, Sheridan Hill subdivision, and Smoke Tree subdivision. If you will also, you'll notice that we're doing a whole lot of work off of Lafayette Boulevard on some of those side streets that connect to Lafayette. And that concludes my report.
Sean? I just wanted to, I wanted to mention Saddlebrook earlier, and I didn't get a chance to. I went in and reviewed that area, and it certainly has improved that whole neighborhood because those roads were badly tore up by those lumber trucks and so forth. And I had nothing but good comments. And a real quick one, Brock Road finished.
Yes, well, Brock Road is also being paved too, so that'll be upcoming this summer.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Thanks, Sean.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next are County Administrator, County Attorney reports. I just wanted to mention a couple of items. First of all, in connection with the public comment regarding the rail bypass of Fredericksburg, I'm going to pass around contact information for DRPT. I did give a copy of this information to the speaker who was present. One of the frustrations reflected in email that I've caught that was forwarded to me by Mr. Sabula is that it's difficult to get hold of a human or even identify what human at DRPT might be related in some way to this project. The main manager of rail planning at DRPT is Ms. Emily Stock. She and other DRPT, and her contact information is here, and this will be on our website as well for interested citizens' use. DRPT did hold public information meetings about the overall project in the city of Fredericksburg last year. I attended one of those in the fall, and at that point asked for a public meeting here in Spotsylvania, and also have commented to them various times about this plan, and they have been slow for whatever reason to organize a public meeting here, but we'll stay after that. Did also want to mention, as I did in the commendations, that Thursday, this Thursday, the 16th at 6:30 at the Marshall Center is the Governor Spotswood Award ceremony honoring Dr. Sambat. And Friday night is family movie night here at Robert E. Lee Elementary, where we will be screening Minions. And the gates open at 8 p.m. and the movie begins at dark. And that is all I have, board members.
Okay. Want to have a board reports? I don't. Mr. Skinner? Mr. Benton? Trampy? Mr. Spula?
Nope.
Mr. Yakubowski?
Thank you. Just two real quick things. One, since we're beefing back up the CBRC, I would ask for that to be put on the agenda of getting direction from this board of what we expect of it. And then number two, myself and many of us had the opportunity to attend a lot of the high school graduations this weekend, which was a very nice time. And the one thing that really stuck out to me, not only just the achievements that our students have made, but the number was that stuck with me was the number of in dollars of scholarships that the graduates received, which was $47.3 million in scholarship dollars that our graduating class received this year. Classes, all the high schools combined. So, which I thought was quite impressive. And I know for me, just seeing many of those kids up there I know that the future is actually quite bright for our country, because you had very smart kids, and a lot of really good kids that achieved a lot and worked hard and are moving along, not only to college but to work and also military. And so just want to say to the schools and to the graduates, thank you for letting me be a part of that, and I look forward to the graduations next year too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry. Just like to add on, the one comment was the $47.3 million has gone up quite substantially from when we first started, down to about $12 million a year, all the way up to 47.3. And I would just bring out the point that I think that our $7 million that we added to the school budget this year is a pretty good ROI, return on investment, and it certainly helps families out there that gets their children through college you can say, because we have good schools and we got good teachers out there. So I too want to say thank you, and I want to thank you to all the principals. The programs were well managed, and I know there's a lot of people there that put a lot of time into that, and it's worthwhile. I mean, we heard some speeches out there that from the valedictorians and stuff that were very impressive, and this year was a very special one too. So I want to say thank you to all the schools and congratulations to all the students that did graduate this year. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Sabula?
Yes, thank you. And I have to add, when the principals asked the students with 4.0 average above or above to please rise, I only saw a few who remained seating. It seemed like everybody in the class was maintaining a 4.0 or above. And people, that's fantastic. That's all I can say. It just shows the caliber and the amount of work that these students and their parents are putting into their education. And I commend them. Thank you.
Okay, and the chair has no report.
Takes us to closed session.
This will be for your first closed meeting. Whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn into closed meeting for a discussion of assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of the county, specifically the interim county attorney and the position of county attorney. And whereas pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.23711, A1, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now therefore be it resolved that Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors does hereby authorize discussion of the aforestated matters.
Have a motion, call the question.
Six yes.
Knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion to convene into closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Mr. Skinner?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Mr. Trampy?
Aye.
Mr. Sabula?
Aye.
Mr. Yakubowski?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
So we're back in open session. The next item on the agenda is public comment for 6:30. Amy, do you have anyone signed up?
No, sir.
Is there anyone that did not sign up that would like to comment? Seeing none?
The Planning Commission Chair calls the meeting to order for the Planning Commission. If you don't mind, stand for a quick prayer and Pledge of Allegiance. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for our blessings today, this glorious day. the freedoms and privileges that we have in this country. We ask for your guidance, strength, and wisdoms in our deliberations this evening. May we be challenged to make this a better world, and in light of recent occurrence down in Orlando, we ask for love, a prayer, and peace upon the victims and families. In your Son's name, we ask for these blessings. Amen. Pledge of allegiance, please.
The flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We have 100% attendance from the Planning Commission, therefore a quorum.
Okay, you good?
Thank you, members of the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors. I'm going to provide a brief overview of the Code of Virginia provisions related to proffers to set the stage for the changes recommended by staff to county code and policy that are on the agenda this evening. May I have the floor computer, please? The Code of Virginia, Section 15.2, 2303.4, was amended, and it's effective July 1st. This section relates to proffers and specifically residential proffers. So any rezoning that comes in July 1st or after that is residential in nature or has a residential component, for example, a mixed-use project, will fall under this new code provision. Proffers are offered by an applicant and accepted by the county. The intent is to offset impacts, including those to public facilities, that are associated with that increase in residential density. A key provision to the new code is that the county may not request or accept an unreasonable proffer. The code provisions then go on to define what is an unreasonable proffer. First off, there are 4 categories of public facilities that the county may accept proffers for in order to mitigate those impacts from the residential uses. Those are transportation, public safety, public parks, and public schools. The code further goes on to describe on-site versus on-site proffers. An on-site proffer addresses an impact within the boundary of that rezoning property. And an off-site proffer addresses an impact outside the boundary of that rezoning property. On-site proffers may include such things that we often see, like design, limitations to uses on the property. They may include public facilities within the development, land dedication for public facilities that's occurring within that development. Off-site proffers, what we would expect to see would be perhaps road improvements or other public facility improvements that are off-site, outside the boundaries of that rezoning. And also cash. The Code of Virginia is very specific in identifying cash, any cash proffer, as an off-site proffer. The code defines unreasonable proffers. I've reworded it here to, we want to think of this in terms of what is a reasonable proffer. The on-site proffer has one stipulation, that the proffer addresses an impact specifically attributable to that residential use. The off-site proffer also has that same provision related to specifically attributable. It also has a test that the residential use create that need for that public facility in excess of the existing public facility capacity. So again, those are the 4 public facilities that are specifically named in the code. Further, that residential use needs to receive a direct and material benefit from the proffer. So these are all very much data-driven. The county needs to be able to say, yes, this development is going to have an impact that is specifically attributable to that residential use, and we believe that that impact is in excess of capacity, and we'll need to back that up with data, and then we'll need to back up with data that direct and material benefit to prove that those residential uses are going to benefit. So this evening, what we're focusing on are items that bring our code and policy in line with the Code of Virginia provisions that become effective July 1st. We've been working under a pretty tight deadline between when the governor passed or signed this law and when it becomes effective. We've been working very closely between planning staff and the county attorney's office to review our ordinance and our policy provisions to determine, first cut, what do we need to change in order to be consistent with the Code of Virginia. So that's what we're focusing on this evening. These include amendments to the zoning ordinance to ensure we have sufficient time for review and evaluation of proffers. We need to be sure that we're gathering that data, bringing forth to the Planning Commission and the board for public hearing proffer statements that we feel very comfortable with. Amendments to the comprehensive plan to ensure there are no statements that could be perceived as requests for proffers. And then finally, to eliminate the proffer guidelines for rezoning applications filed on July 1st or after. In talking with a lot of other jurisdictions, some are about where we are, some are lagging behind and still figuring out what they're going to do, but quite a few of them are following the same procedure and eliminating their proffer guidelines. So with that, if there are no questions, we can move into the public hearings, and Jacob is going to handle the first one related to the zoning ordinance update.
Sure. Mr. Skinner?
Wanda, I want to clarify one thing, please, and that is, on your slide you showed cash proffers with only off-site proffers. So we have an on-site proffer, and we have a big development, and let's say they offer some schools, money for schools or stuff. We cannot accept that?
That's considered an off-site proffer, and that needs to meet these three tests here shown under off-site proffer. So it's the more stringent requirements under the Code of Virginia.
Okay. I guess the best way then is explain exactly what on-site means as far as off-site, because you're saying that cash is associated with off-site.
Yes.
When I think of off-site, I think of things that are outside of the rezoning the district. So let's say we had a big organization like Alexandria's Crossing, which was very big out there, but within that zoning, they wanted to place a school or a fire department. Are you saying that that could not be accepted or is that just considered off-site? And see, that's where I'm confused at, and I think a lot of people may be confused as far as on-site and off-site.
So if a developer wished to proffer $10,000 towards public safety,
okay,
that would be considered an off-site proffer, and we would need to be able to prove, in order to accept that, we'd need to be able to prove these three tests here.
But it would be within the same zoning district, the rezoning?
It would be their proffer associated with their rezoning.
Okay.
But alternatively, if they were to propose a site, a pad site, for a fire and rescue station within their development, we may be able to accept that because it would be an on-site proffer, and we would need to prove that the residential uses, that proffer for that on-site pad site is specifically attributable to those residential uses. And we may be able to do that if it was, a large rezoning with a higher number of residential units. So the on-site proffer, it could be land dedication. But any cash that is proffered, just purely by the way it's defined in the Code of Virginia, is considered an off-site proffer.
And therefore has to be outside.
Well,
You see, because when you said that in there, I thought what we said was, we talked about within off-site, so roads and stuff of that nature, that they may affect, outside the rezoning area that they're talking about.
right. So Presumably, then that cash would be used to perhaps put an addition on the existing high school that's going to be over capacity.
Okay.
So,
Okay, I got that. All right, okay, so I think I understand now. Thank you.
Any other comments, Mr. Jakubowski?
Thank you. Thank you, Wanda. First, well, actually, thank you to the General Assembly, because we didn't know what we would be doing this evening, but they filled our plate, and I'm sure you guys have had nothing to do for the past couple months, so we'll send them a thank you card. Two questions. On the offsite proffer, you have there, the residential use creates a need in excess of existing public facility capacity. Is that cumulative?
well, Carl, jump in here, but I think that we feel comfortable in looking at it cumulatively. So the development spreadsheet that I keep, that's an appendix in each of the rezonings that come through, in which we're keeping track of all of the approved but not yet built units, and then we look at their impacts on, we have within their schools and fire and rescue. We believe that we will be able to use that spreadsheet and take into account what's been approved but not yet built in looking at the capacity. So we'll look at current capacity plus capacity that is coming in the future that's approved units that's going to take up part of that capacity. So yes,
Well,
is the answer to your question.
Thank you. Well, the argument I would make if I was on the other side is my development will be done in 5 years, and these have been stated to be 20 years. So my capacity, I'm using the capacity that's there now. They're the ones they're not going to be using, that there's not space there because they're further out. Because a lot of these might be rezonings that sit idle for a long time, and then all of a sudden they come online. And at some point, somebody has to pay for that. And that's what's so ridiculous about all of this. When we remove the proffer guidelines, as you are saying that you need to, does that also remove the formulas that go beyond to how we determine capacity and levels of service?
No, it doesn't remove those aspects. For example, our student generation numbers, it doesn't remove those. It would remove the proffer policy related to the methodology for determining a bottom line number on a per capita cost of a new facility. So it doesn't remove the inputs. I would call those the inputs, the level of service, the student generation, our persons per household. Those are all inputs, and those are viable and they're justifiable. So I think those are fine, but just the methodology that then results in that bottom line number that we have recommended contribution related to schools or for transportation. That's what we don't see as being valid anymore.
So basically, the cost per pupil, let's say, dealing with schools, is up for debate.
Yes.
The actual cost.
Yes, because we need to look at this at a more granular level than our current proffer guidelines are. For example, schools. The cost for new school construction is taken from an average of recent Virginia schools constructed. So that's looking at schools in Virginia. It's not granular enough to Spotsylvania County to be able to say this is the cost that we feel comfortable with. So that's part of the reason that we're recommending not continuing to have proffer guidelines related to rezonings after July 1st.
So we will still have a formula that says rezonings are detrimental to our levels of service, student population, public safety, whatever it might be, traffic, but we can't then determine the cost of that because we need to get that down to, it's debatable is basically what it comes down to, is we can have the formula, but we don't have the numbers. So then they come up and say, well, the formula, I like your formula, but my numbers say this. Okay, so basically, even if we were to receive proffers and they were claimed to be full proffers, they could be claimed to be full proffers at what they claim the number should be, not what the county has
Right.
come up with in the past.
Yes, if an applicant proposes a proffer and they provide us with their justification for it, we'll then need to review it and determine whether we feel comfortable with their approach.
But if we don't have any guidelines, all we have are level of service numbers, and we
Oh.
don't have numbers attached to our guideline, or to our,
We do have a lot of data.
Okay.
We do have costs. We can go to our CIP. So, you know, we're going to have to approach it in a different way. In each case, we might have to approach a little differently, depending on the specifics of the case. But what will be the easiest is if there is a need and we have a CIP item, we can go straight to that CIP, and we've got the data to be able to figure out what is the per capita cost of that new house for that CIP improvement that's going to directly and materially benefit that rezoning.
and how easy, well, I shouldn't say easy, but how strong are the numbers that you have which are able to be backed up? Is that up for debate? You know, because it's a formula we've come up with, but other counties have a different formula.
Right, and we're actually in the process of looking at different approaches to our student generation numbers. We're layering our GIS database, taking in census information and trying to create a GIS-based method of looking at these rezonings as they come in. So a lot of this is still a work in progress, but we have thought of that, and we're trying to get down to as granular and specific a level of data as we can.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Richard?
If I may, are we in danger of having a situation where we won't have a proper guideline to work with and still get rezoning requests? Or is that a possibility?
Proffer guidelines are not a requirement. There's no
Right.
mandate that the county have any sort of guidelines. So the county can certainly accept proffers as long as we feel comfortable accepting them under this new state code section.
Another question. Under this new state code section we're dealing with here, is it a possibility that we'll get a request and there will be no proffer offers at all?
Entirely
Is that-
possible,
That's
yes.
a reality? It could be a
Yes.
reality?
Yes.
Then what happens with that? The taxpayers have to pick up the slack? Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, the funding then for addressing those impacts needs to come from elsewhere. It cannot come from a cash proffer.
And you're telling us that as of July the 1st is when what we are working with now will no longer be in force? Is that what we?
Correct, for any application submitted on July 1st or after. So we do have a few pending rezonings that have not yet made it through the process.
That's really
but-
sketchy.
but-
We could get annihilated here. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may, please. Wanda, I'm going to give you an example, and you tell me what we would do. When we go to Heritage Development, and we go to Alexandria's Crossing, and however we know that it's going to have an impact on Route 1. I mean, that, because of that rezoning, that's an impact that it's going to be in that area. We cannot receive proffers, cash proffers. And what do we do about transportation?
Well, we potentially could accept cash proffers. For a project like that, we receive a traffic analysis. So we do have a lot of data there to see exactly what impact that development is going to have on Route 1.
All right, it's off-site, but that's...
So yes, so we can look there and see the traffic from this development is going to degrade the levels of service on Route 1 from a C to a D. So we have something measurable there. And then also keep in mind that this only applies to the residential component. There are non-residential components to a lot of these rezonings where the county could accept off-site proffers related to the non-residential portions of it. So that is still out there and open for discussion.
Thank you.
Mr. Benton?
This is probably totally off topic, but are we able to establish special tax
Yes.
districts for each of these?
Yes, that has been a discussion that some localities are going to be looking more closely at special service districts and establishing those to address their public facility needs.
And
that's an option.
There's another question. For zoning and planning approvals, I think I asked this in an email, so I didn't do it publicly, and I think I got the answer of yes, but it would go through our ordinances. I just wanted to make sure, are we able to put a time limit on our approvals through planning and zoning approvals that?
With the rezoning, I think the applicant needs to proffer some sort of sunset provision. The county cannot. If the applicant were to proffer a sunset provision with their rezoning.
That's something we'd have to take a look at. I know you can proffer construction in stages, phasing, but as to whether or not there could be a sunset provision that would somehow undo the rezoning action, well, we can take a look at that.
I'd like to, because I mean, like the incident over there by Hazelwild, 24 years later, we're getting hit with the subdivision wants to come in and they don't have to do anything. So I'd really like to look at some sort of time limits and what we're legally able to do there, instead of this just carrying on till eternity, and then by the time something wants to be built or comes to fruition, that it's truly detrimental to our community.
So just to clarify something, we're going to a public hearing next to discuss these topics in more detail.
We're going to talk about those three items. Oh, it's not up now, but first the zoning ordinance, then the comprehensive plan, and then finally the proffer policy. And the proffer item is actually not a public hearing. That's a board policy, so there's no public hearing associated with it.
All right. With that said, is there any more questions, or do we want to go into the public hearing portion? Okay.
One, as I was reading through the materials and the materials you presented just now, one of the things that keeps popping out at me is the word capacity, where previously capacity was more, as I understood, it wasn't really looked at. It was more, this is the impact of a child, for an example, for the school. Now we're looking at capacity. And so we hit that threshold of this school's at capacity, now it's one over. What does that mean for a reasonable proffer in that example? It's obviously not an entire school. However, if you're over capacity, how's that taken consideration?
It would need to be specifically attributable to those residential units. So if there were 20 students coming out of that development that made the capacity 20 seats over, we would then narrow in on those 20 students.
Jakubowski.
Thank you. To follow up with that, what if, and I'm sorry if you already answered it, what if the school's already over capacity?
Then it would be any students associated with that residential use.
Okay. And then the two more points real quick, and then we can get on with this, is Mr. Benton talking about special service districts. Just wait, the General Assembly's in session next year, and I do believe they're going to be taking a look at that and totally gutting them. And then the other question was old rezonings, previous rezonings that we've had. I know it has to be a substantial change to come back and go through the process, but geez, if you're a developer that just proffered, $50 million, and these other people are coming in for basically peanuts, why not go in, change a few things around? I mean, that's not prohibited, is it?
It's not prohibited. I think when that situation comes up, we're going to need to consult with our legal staff and determine should that be viewed as a completely new rezoning. But yes, you're right. Enough changes, they could make a new proposal, bring it forward under this new requirements.
So that's a whole nother avenue of issues that we need to be on the lookout for, because this just opens that door wide open for any of that stuff to come in, whether it actually happens or not. It's something to definitely take a look at. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Let's move on to the public hearing.
Good evening. Floor computer, please. Thank you. All right. This evening's first public hearing is focused on the actual rezoning section of the zoning ordinance. Proposes to amend the zoning ordinance this evening, Chapter 23. This is subject for public hearings. The recommendation from staff, just getting this started, due to necessity to react to upcoming proffer regulation with the July 1st deadline, staff does recommend approval of these recommended amendments. Staff believes they adequately address what we need to within the rezoning section in terms of the process, procedure, and application requirements for rezoning applications going forward. I want to give an overview of the proposed changes within this particular section of the zoning ordinance. The proposed amendments are meant to ensure consistency with Code of Virginia regulations governing proffers. As Wanda had stated, these regulations are to become effective on July 1st. I would also add that this is part of an ongoing effort, as Planning Commission and Board are probably familiar, to update the zoning ordinance. We were going to bring this forward as part of a larger package. We're kind of getting towards the end of the zoning ordinance update, and we're going to batch this together and bring this forward. But with this new legislation, staff has decided to kind of peel that one off and fast track it through the process. So this, I guess, one silver lining on this is this is part of the update of the zoning ordinance as well. Substantive changes to the timelines for submission review of proffers is one of the major things that we have proposed within this section of the code. One of the things that we found is that time is necessary to thoroughly review and vet proffers to ensure they are reasonable and specifically attributable. This avoids on-the-spot evaluation of proffers at public hearings. Staff has found it necessary to basically build in time requirements for proffers, that they must be submitted and finalized 14 days prior to going forward to a public hearing. Or in the case of within a public hearing setting where proffers may be discussed, we need to make sure that they are attributable and reasonable. So we need time to essentially delay votes, go back and make sure that they're adequate, reasonable proffers, and then be able to repackage that new set of proffers and move it forward. So unfortunately, proffers aren't able to move. We're not able to get them at the last minute. We really need finalized proffers well in advance to make sure that we're dealing with a good set for everyone involved. Additionally, I would add that in an effort to ensure that the rezoning applications are complete and provide staff the ability to review and address the goals of the comprehensive plan, as well as accurately review how reasonable proposed proffers are, the application submission requirements have been reviewed, modified, and clarified. One of the reasons we need these certain specified application items is to determine whether there is an impact that exists and what a reasonable proffer associated to offset that may be. So you'll find that we have changed some of our application requirements. Staff simply needs that information to assure throughout the review, and so we avoid uncertainty and vagueness in application review processes. So this is the new timeline that results from the amendments in front of you. If you look on the left-hand side here, we have to check and make sure that the proffer is signed and notarized, and we have to check whether the proffer statement is approved as the form. This includes a legal review on that. Once the public hearing is scheduled, if the applicant wants to revise a proffer statement during the public hearing process, we need to, we're built in language to continue consideration of the matter to allow county review, and that no proffer revision be accepted within 14 days of a scheduled public hearing. So in that sense, in some ways, this really does delay the process throughout the public hearing. It'll definitely slow things down, but in the interest of being consistent with the requirements, this is probably the best for everyone, including applicants. Lastly, just to wrap this up, we do also have, this is part of that larger zoning update. We have reorganized a number of sections and renumbered them due to consolidation of similar regulations or removal of sections addressed elsewhere in the zoning ordinance. This is a cleanup function. For instance, I'd like to bring up an example that within the rezoning section, there are sections that outline Historic Preservation Commission duties and process. This language staff found to be best located elsewhere in Chapter 23 under Article 3, Division 4 for the Historic Preservation Commission. So we have tried to clean this up to make it more proper. There's also language regarding zoning appeals and enforcement that's referenced, and what we ended up doing was shifting that down to a more appropriate section that is focused more on indexing, administration, enforcement, and appeals. So you'll see those throughout the amendments as well. And with that, we'll take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Mr. Spila? Yes, thank you. So I guess what this means is that we're sitting here today, it's going through a public hearing, and the developer makes his presentation. You've made your presentation. Then there's the public hearing. People get up and speak, and they have comments. Developer hears these comments, sees that there's something that he could fix to certainly help ensure he gets a positive vote for whatever he's looking for. And if I understand what you said right, no way, Jose, you can't do this anymore. So the developer can't stand up there and say, okay, board, I would proffer to do this to satisfy this requirement.
And Wanda and Carl, feel free to back me
Not
up
trying
on
to
this.
put you on the
But
spot,
no,
but-
absolutely. From the way I understand it, they can do this, but there's going to be a delay in them being able to do it. We'll basically have to consider those amendments and make sure that they're considered reasonable proffers underneath the code, and they're addressing the public facilities as specified in the code adequately. So it essentially, I would say it delays the process. You end up having to delay your vote and.
Right, it's going to go to another meeting.
That's right. Essentially, an applicant can absolutely get up and make a proffer at the meeting, but what that does is it triggers a requirement that the matter be continued, and that's to allow us to ensure that we're on the right side of the law here. So that's what Jacob was getting at when he said that it's absolutely going to delay things. It's onerous in that respect. So.
Thank you.
Mr. Skinner.
Thank you, sir. I got a question. On these 4 areas, transportation, public safety, public parks, and public schools, have we any idea if the current proffers that we use in those 4 areas are legitimate or, good working proffers?
We don't believe so, because as I mentioned earlier, the inputs, schools, we're using average school construction costs in Virginia. Fire and rescue, we're using an industry standard RS means to come up with costs. So, that's just not granular enough. So what we need to do is look to our CIP more, look at projects that are occurring, look at projected real-time, real-life project costs associated with what is being, with what needs to be mitigated.
Have we thought of possibly, let's say, having the Attorney General look at these? I mean, are we sure that because the formula we use, we have the same interpretation as the state on this? I know what you're saying. Like you say, you take the average school, and we certainly built Riverbend at a fairly high price. So I'm just wondering, are we taking this upon ourselves, or is it possible to get, let's say, the Attorney General's, and going through certain means to do that, to take a look at these and see if they're out of scope?
We have not. I don't know if, Carl, if you have any thoughts on that. I know that it sometimes takes a while to get an opinion.
If the question is whether or not we've had the Attorney General look at our proffer guidelines to make a determination of whether they would hold up under the new laws, no, we haven't. And it's also something that I doubt the Attorney General would opine upon. There are certain things that they kind of defer with respect to. And also, I think, just from a basic evaluation, I mean, our proffer guidelines currently are established to address impacts county-wide. To say that no matter where you are in the county, this is going to be the impact with respect to a child in school, with respect to transportation. And the new law requires that you look actually, within a school district and which school district is serving the development. So just by that definition, or that standard, making countywide policies and requiring them, putting a new legal standard that they require to be viewed district by district, just in and of themselves, recognizing that they're established countywide makes them problematic. So that's why we've made the grand recommendation to actually remove them, because they're there, they're established. The reason for them is to address the whole county. And the new law is saying you can't look at developments when you look at impact on the whole county. You got to look at school districts. You got to look at those roads that are close in to that development. You can no longer look and evaluate countywide.
And certainly within the proffer policies as well, there are categories such as libraries, solid waste, and general government that are absolutely removed under these public facility definitions.
Okay, any other comments?
May I please? Going back to Mr. Sabula's statement that he made, which is very true, and you stated that if an applicant would want to fix a problem and would proffer, I will do so. Do we have to re-advertise, or will that continue? We can say, well, if we wanted to make a motion to continue because of this, is that how we would do this? And would we have to re-advertise?
Typically, no. If there's a continuance to the next meeting, there's no re-advertisement required. Generally, if it ends up getting continued several meetings down, the recommendation is that a re-advertisement be made. But if it's to the next meeting, that typical continuance, it's my understanding, is not a re-advertisement requirement.
And that would give planning staff 14 days again, if it was continued, and that would give staff 14 days till our next meeting. Is that correct?
From the time they were approved as the form.
I guess it depends on the calendar and how the meetings fall on the calendar, whether a continuance to the next meeting would be sufficient. Some of our meetings, the first meeting to the third the first Wednesday to the third Wednesday of the month, that's going to be very tight. Mm-hmm. They'd need to have their proffers ready to go right there, submission. So, it may be that they're continued for a month out.
I'd just like to follow up one thing. You talked about our proffers now. I don't think our proffers, because when we have let's take Alexandria Crossing that we approved, okay? Their proffers were based on the schools within that district, not Riverbend or anything else, correct? We did not have that on there. We didn't, and the public safety was based on the fire stations around the local area, how much would put on number 4, okay? And so when I look through everything that we've done so far, we've based it on the locale, the district that we're in, and those schools that are in that district, what type of impact they are. So I don't understand the difference for a proffer for schools, let's say, or proffer for transportation, because Alexandria Crossing never took in consideration Route 3. And when Route 3 has a proffer on that, never considers Route 1 over here. So I'm not really following, when you say that it has to be, just our guideline so far has always been directed for the locality that we're in, that I realize that, okay? Whether it does with transportation, the roads locally here, whether it has to do with schools, public safety, or public parks of that nature. So I don't necessarily agree, and that's why I'm saying maybe you say the Attorney General might not do that, but when we've had our proffers in the back, it's been directed to the local district.
Yes, that's true. We do look at the impacts to that school that the development's going to use. And ultimately, the proffers are directed to impacts in that area. But just the proffer guidelines themselves are countywide averages.
If there are no other comments or questions, the Planning Commission would like to open up the public hearing at this time. And I will do so. And I presume we have people to speak to this application.
There's one citizen signed up to speak, Carl Valentine.
As you approach the podium, you'll notice a box on top. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. There'll be a green light. When it turns to yellow, you're winding down to 1 minute. And when it
Where's the
turns red,
light?
I'd ask you to finish it up.
Okay.
Yep, there you go.
Mr. Chairman, did you declare the board's public hearing open also for this item?
Well, that's what I just asked the county attorney. He said, it's a joint public hearing. Do we agree with that?
Yeah, it's a joint hearing, so I think whoever wants to take the reins to open the joint public hearing will be fine.
In case somebody disagrees, I am now opening the public hearing for the Board of Supervisors as well.
Thank you for the record.
The one thing that first of all, my name is Carl Valentine. Do I need to give my address, et cetera? It's already in the record. My interest is the mention of cul-de-sacs. And the statement that's written here says should be discouraged and only employed in rare instances. I recently saw some VDOT people surveying my street, Teesside Drive, and asked what they were doing. And he says, we're surveying this for a potential builder of 19 new homes at the end of Teesside Drive. And so I inquired, I said, but this, we were told when we bought here, nobody would ever build beyond there because the property was owned by somebody else and they didn't want to sell. And he said that if they do, you're going to lose your cul-de-sac. We bought because it was a cul-de-sac. And so I hope that somebody will change that so that cul-de-sacs are not a dirty word. As I understand it, some law was passed several years ago that discouraged the use of cul-de-sacs, but I wasn't aware of that until recently. Another thing that's mentioned in here is drainage and stormwater features. We have one in off of Teesside Drive, and that has grown up, and I understand that it's encouraged to let them grow up. That makes a good place for snakes and frogs and stuff, and that's not good for the houses on either side of it. This new development that is proposed to go in would have another one, which is behind another one in my neighborhood. I am against the destruction of the cul-de-sac in order to extend to new property, and that would add another 180 or 90 cars driving down Teesside Drive, a residential street, on a daily basis. As I understand it, you can figure for maybe 10 cars trips a day from different houses. And I suggest that in order to relieve some of the Andorra Old Plank Road congestion, morning and afternoon, if a rotary could be put in there. And I know that that would probably require the community center to lose some of its property. And the house that sits on the corner now on the property that would have the 19 houses would have to be used for that. But it sure would relieve the congestion there. Because of the entrance of
Sir,
our
if
place.
you'd please sum up, your time has expired.
Okay. And I would like to have a stoplight for the entrance to Ashley Park. It's a dangerous corner.
Anybody else signed up to speak?
No, sir.
Anybody that did not sign up would like to speak?
Rupert Farley, 7900 Chancellor Road, Chancellor District. I really wasn't planning on speaking, but I feel like I need to rebut the cul-de-sac remarks. Cul-de-sacs are bad news. Anybody who knows anything about planning knows that. They're expensive to maintain, and they also break up neighborhoods. We need to have more cul-de-sacs cut through and joining neighborhoods, more interparcel connectivity. Not only is it better for the taxpayer, it's healthier for the communities because people can walk around instead of having to drive a mile just to get to a neighbor that's only within sight of them. Now that I'm here, I'll make a remark about the issue on the floor. I don't see the big issue of delays. You know, if proposals that are put on the table are delayed, who cares? So what? Let them be delayed years if you want to, until while we analyze them and get it right. I think it's to the county's advantage that we take all the time we want. And if the developer doesn't like it, tough. Also, if we get proffers here, you think we're going to start getting proffers that are lowball? Sure, we're going to get lowball proffers. Well, there's a way to handle that. Just say no. Thanks.
Anybody else like to speak?
Rob Shercliffe. I am a developer. And all developments are not created equal. I think fundamentally, one of the biggest problems we face as a community is that when we approach this subject of growth, we don't ask the fundamental question, what will it look like? We focus too much on proffers. I'll give you an example. I'm a developer of a community, many of you know, where the average property values are going to soon be over $700,000. Now, I asked staff at one point in time if, in fact, or is there, in fact, a value for a residence that offsets the services that the county provides? The answer was yes, approximately $370,000, $380,000. Well, what if the value of the home is twice that? Will you take that into consideration when we may come before you for another rezoning, especially when we employ local subcontractors and buy from our local supply houses as opposed to being a home to a nationally traded corporation? I think it's really important that we focus on the word community. Recently, I looked as I was at the desk at the Builders Association at our motto, building a better community. And I questioned my fellow directors if we were doing that. And I'm not sure that we are. But again, I think it's really important that what growth becomes is something that we can all be proud of. And that doesn't mean necessarily that the value be $700,000, but certainly leaning towards buffers and preserving personal adjacent privacy rights is important, and many, many others. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Any other comments on what was addressed from either board? Mr. Barnes.
And I'm going to ask staff to kind of jump in if I've got this wrong. But my understanding is it's bricks and mortar only as of July 1. There's nothing else, correct?
Yes. Cash proffers go towards bricks and mortar public facilities and the four facilities that we discussed.
Second question is, what I'm sensing is because there's time that our staff needs to review, legal needs to review. So what the board will consider tonight is basically removing the Proffer guidelines as of July 1. So there's going to be some period of time here where we'll have no Proffer guidelines until we come back and decide whether we are, and if so, what they look like. Correct? So that's going to be a matter of months, not weeks.
Correct.
Okay. The next comment I kind of want to make has to do with the CIP. One of the things that was mentioned is if we do develop a new Proffer guideline, the data is going to be very important. And part of it is our CIPs, because it's got to be in the CIP. We only do a 5-year CIP. And obviously, looking at the CIP, I'm just looking at it, in the next 5 years, we've got $15 million worth of fire and rescue equipment.
no buildings in that number. That's a separate thing. And we can go down the list and kind of go through that. But again, when we have, so if we have a project that comes before us, there's still no reason, if the project we feel like does not mitigate the impact it's having on public safety or whatever it is, we just turn it down. Regardless of what the proffers say or do not say, we still have that option to do it while we're trying to figure this thing out.
The Planning Commission can recommend and the board can deny, for sound reasons based on levels of service, the comprehensive plan, fit within the community. So really it's focusing towards that comprehensive plan for either the support for a rezoning or the support for the denial of the rezoning.
And what I'm getting back is the link between the comprehensive plan and our CIP. And I know that, we've got great finance staff, and I know they look at numbers far past, they go out 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I would, encourage, staff as we're looking at to look at 10-year data to see what it is, because you may not have a school in that 5-year, but you may have it in the 10-year, and things of that nature, so that those numbers are more refined as we're moving forward, so that we don't get bottled down on just trying to come up with all the proper guidelines and do all that. But really, the bottom line is, what is the impact to the community here relative to the CIP and the dollars that we're going to have to pay in over 5 years, 10 years, and so forth. So
yes.
That's my only comment.
Chairman?
Yes.
If I may, this was that public presentation. This was a public hearing on the cases that we had before us. Am I correct?
Correct.
I think maybe there are some that might be a little confused on this. I don't know, but we have some gentlemen, I think, that might have gotten.
Well, there's another public hearing following this one about the comprehensive plan. So what is the question? No, we've closed the public hearing at this point. There'll be another opportunity in the next public hearing shortly.
I think that's what they want to know. Thank you, sir.
And I'm assuming what you're going to state will fit in the next public hearing as well.
From a Planning Commission standpoint, I guess at this point we'll take a motion on the application.
If the Planning Commission chooses to do so, that'll be fine.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to continue until later in the meeting, if it's the will and the desire of the Planning Commission members.
By later, after we come back from closed session?
Yes, sir.
Very well. We have a motion before the commission. Can I have a second on that?
Second.
I guess we go to a roll call vote. Is that correct? Mr. Burns? Aye. Mr. Bullock? Ms. Carter?
Aye.
Mr. Medina?
Aye.
Mr. Smith? Aye. Mr. Thompson?
Yo.
And the chair votes aye. And the motion passes.
So now to the Board of Supervisors, we're in the same boat. Do we have a motion? Mr. Skinner? For a continuance until after the, okay. So we have a motion to continue until after the closed door meeting this evening, and we can vote, right? Okay, let's call the question.
Six yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next public hearing is related to the comprehensive plan. Again, these amendments proposed are associated with the Code of Virginia proffer changes that are effective July 1st. Just to reiterate, the key components of the Code of Virginia that led us to make these recommendations: the concept that a proffer is unreasonable unless it addresses an impact specifically attributable to the proposed development, and that the county may not request or accept an unreasonable proffer. The county also cannot deny a rezoning based on the applicant's failure to offer what is considered an unreasonable proffer. So what we did was look through the comprehensive plan, and we have amendments. Some of them are just one amendment, some are a few, but to each chapter within the comprehensive plan. The focus here is to remove any concept or idea that through our comprehensive plan the county is requesting a proffer. So what we're doing is removing specific references to the proffer guidelines themselves. That only appeared in a couple of places within the plan. We remove references to recommended improvements and mitigation measures that could be interpreted as a request for a proffer. For example, the Fort A.P. Hill policies had specific mitigation related to residential development, and those included real estate disclosures, noise attenuation, and dark sky lighting. So we actually have in our current comprehensive plan that we recommend that applicants proffer these things. So related to the dark sky lighting, we're approaching that through the code. We have a draft amendment to our lighting provisions within the zoning ordinance. They're actually on our planning department webpage right now for public review, and they include dark sky lighting provisions. So that idea we're just completely removing from the comp plan because we're seeking to codify it. The other items related to real estate disclosures and noise attenuation, we've removed those as recommendations for mitigation. And instead, we identify that there's a concern with residential development within the Fort A.P. Hill approach fan, and that there may be noise associated with Fort A.P. Hill, and that the county is supportive of the Fort A.P. Hill joint land use study recommendations. So all the information is there. Somebody just needs to look at those recommendations in that study to determine what some appropriate mitigation measures might be. Within the plan, we had encourage a number of places. Encourage could be perceived as a request. So we've changed those to support. One example of a change we made is where we talked about rezoning proposals should demonstrate a proportionate share contribution towards the provision of public facilities to serve the development. With that specifically attributable requirement now, that does not equal proportionate share. So we've changed that to say rezoning proposals should address impacts that are specifically attributable to the development. We've also removed policies that are actually covered by code requirements. We had in there some places where there were recommended open space goals. Open space is addressed in each of our residential zoning categories, so we just defer to the code in those cases. So for the most part, these changes that are addressed are wording changes. We're not making major changes to policy that was adopted in 2013. We're simply trying to clean up the wording so that we could not be perceived as requesting a proffer. And just since a comment was made about cul-de-sacs during the last public hearing, I'll just take the opportunity to address that specific item for the gentleman's benefit. Nothing this evening is specifically related to any particular rezoning proposal. The proposal off of Teesside Drive, we have no application at this point in time for a rezoning. The cul-de-sac, the discouraging cul-de-sac comment, that's actually related to our mixed land use policies. So of course in mixed land use we're encouraging grid street systems, not cul-de-sacs. So that's very specific to mixed use. So I just wanted to go ahead and address those questions that already did come up. So with that, staff does recommend approval of CPA 16-0002.
Any comments, Mr. Skinner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's go back to the dark lighting, okay? So here we are. We're in support of our military bases around here. If it wasn't for our military bases around here, we probably wouldn't have what we have, which in Quantico and A.P. Hill and Dahlgren and stuff of that nature. So one of the most important things at A.P. Hill is the dark lighting because of the night vision goggles that they use going in there. So I want to completely understand that now do we change your ordinance to be part that it's, night lighting is required rather than saying you can proffer it? Or do we put it in there and saying, because if we don't support our military, we're hurting ourselves on this case?
Yes, and Jacob can jump in here because he wrote this section of the ordinance, but it's county-wide that we're looking to implement dark sky lighting provisions. So it wouldn't simply be the area near Fort APL. We'd be looking for this county-wide.
Okay, so we're not just saying, you know, we think it'd be nice to proffer it. We're saying we're going to make it a requirement.
Correct, it would be a requirement.
Okay.
I can give a little bit more detail on
Sure,
that.
please.
There are a few exceptions, holiday lighting, residential, like single-family homes. Those are exceptions to the dark side lighting ordinance. Dark side lighting ordinance that's been written has been more catered to your industrial, commercial office users that may have large signs, large parking lot lights, lights on their buildings. I can tell you that the dark side lighting ordinance that we are having draft, and it's up for public comment, has been reviewed by planning, zoning for enforcement purposes, Fort A.P. Hill, as well as a number of lighting industry representatives as well that we had help us with some of the technical details of outdoor lighting. And Fort A.P. Hill has been supportive of the draft as the form. So in that sense, I do believe the ordinance has addressed the concerns that we historically have looked at in the comprehensive plan, and we're going to try to codify that. One of the big important things of that as well is enforcement and making sure our zoning office can actually interpret that language and has the resources to actually enforce it. And they are content as well with the language as drafted. So.
Okay, I'd only add this to it, okay? We're going to give you out at, out where we have the sports park, okay, and everything where we have the fields, okay? And now we've got Tricor building out there. One of the things that we had to look at, I understand residential, you said really not residential, but yet the street lights that they're putting in out there should be down lighting, is what I'm saying. Now, I understand the porch light, I understand it completely that way, but I don't think we can completely leave residential just because it's residential that it doesn't have that, because that's directly in the path of the approach going into A.P. Hill and stuff of this nature. Now, this has already been passed, so we know we're good out there, but in the future, I don't know what's going to go in or where we might have more growth that will affect A.P. Hill. So my only concern is when you say it doesn't really impact residential, I think it does in certain areas. And if we don't cover that, we can't go back and say, oh, well, this is an exception. I think in the language, we should at least state that if it impacts a military reservation or something of that nature, then that has to be considered as a requirement. Not necessarily halfway over in, you know, in Chancellor or someplace like that, but certainly in my district where we impact A.P. Hill a lot, we need to add that in there.
And I'll double check the language. I don't have it in front of me this evening, but I'll double check it as it relates to things like streetlights and all that. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
If it please the chair, the dark sky lighting, is that only going to affect, this ordinance only going to affect the future, or are you going to create a situation where we can go back and correct other areas that need to be corrected as of today?
This is meant to apply to developments as we receive plans for review, not a retroactive, enforcement knocking on somebody's door.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Yakubowski.
Thanks. A couple of questions I got. And I'll just read through the pages. Page 11, Section 3 of the red line comp plan deals with clustering in AG or agricultural zones. They're being removed?
Those provisions were removed related to the open space. Was the focus there, that those encourage an open space that's often larger than what the zoning district requires, and clustering is encouraged elsewhere, so we just remove that provision.
Okay, and then on page 12, you do the same thing again.
Right, deferring to the zoning ordinance open space requirements.
Okay, so we're still going to encourage clustering?
Yes.
Okay. And then, if I'm reading this correctly, on page 29, dealing with transportation and the obtaining of right-of-way, under strategies, number 2 is completely eliminated, which is to obtain ultimate right-of-way?
Right, and that's actually within our design standards manual, so we do have that elsewhere within the code.
Okay, so this is the cleanup.
This is the cleanup, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Barnes.
Actually, I want to piggyback on Chris's question as far as the right-of-way. So everything that's being removed here, we were talking about private, but we have, other than we have specific in the design standards or somewhere else in planning code that we can address that. So it really doesn't go away.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other Mr. Sabula?
Yeah, just to follow up on that a little bit. Legal has taken and looked at all of these changes and concurs that the encouraged supports and so forth are all proper and correct and have been handled properly.
Yes, we've reviewed this, and we've been in a definite part of the process together with planning.
Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, we will open the joint public hearing of the Board of Supervisors and a Planning Commission.
And for the record, I think we should note, in consideration of the confusion earlier, without objection from either body, that comments on this public hearing, which is the Comprehensive Plan Amendments Public Hearing, CPA 16002, comments made here will also be considered relative to the zoning ordinance amendments, given that the vote on those has been deferred, so that comments at this hearing can be considered for both cases.
Okay. Anybody signed up to speak?
Yes. The first citizen is Rob Schrath, I believe it is, followed by Frank Broderson. Frank Broderson, followed by Dick Szymanski.
Good evening. My name is Frank Broderson. I live on West Philippi in the Battlefield District. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Spotsylvanians for Responsible Growth, a grassroots group dedicated to improving the quality of life here in Spotsy. We have previously published that the amount of proffers that the Board of Supervisors have left on the table is in the range of $155 million, as it approved 10,869 new residences over the last 4 years. These are the costs of development that will need to be paid by other methods, presumably local taxes. That 155 million shortfall figure is a combination of the old and new proffer guidelines. Members and participants in Spotsylvania's building industry met for months to develop specific public costs created by growth. You approved the new guidelines. They were about 13% below the previous ones. The new proffers are specifically attributable to each development, and they did include solid waste parks and libraries. Senator Reeves' new law affirmed the use of proffers by Virginia localities, but per the Freelance Star reports, prohibited those specific categories. They would reduce Spotsylvania's specifically attributable proffers another 9 or 10%. That still leaves roughly 120 million net cash proffer dollars necessary to build the capital facilities required by the growth you have already approved. Without proffers, new residents will not pay their fair share. Why? We've asked before and we ask again tonight. Why shouldn't new residents pay as we grow? There is no disagreement. Developers, builders, professional county staff, realtors, the state, and the public all agree. Growth creates the need that requires new public facilities. Proffers create cash flow as the growth occurs. They are good fiscal government. Depending upon a 30-year payback after completion, or depending on unknown future commercial development to plug the revenue gap, is foolhardy. Presently, there is a huge inventory of vacant and unbuilt commercial real estate. We urge the board to update the proffer guidelines to exclude only those proffers that are now specifically prohibited by Reeves' new law. We urge the board to apply new proffer guidelines uniformly and transparently for every new development. Otherwise, you will be raising taxes on all of Spotsylvania for generations, which is contrary to your individual campaign pledges and, frankly, is contrary to good government. Spotsylvania can be a fiscally sound, attractive destination for commercial and residential development if we have responsible growth. Thank you.
Dick Szymanski, followed by Suzanne Mears.
Thank you. I'm Dick Szymanski at 5118 Sewells Point Drive in Battlefield District. I think Mr. Broderson pointed out, I think, the good numbers of what responsible government's all about. And, you know, I read an article Sunday about restricting housing growth has consequences. Well, I also think that if we let the growth go rampant, we also will have consequences, and I think Mr. Broderson brought that out pretty well. Give you an example. I was coming from worship at noon Sunday at Lafayette and Route 1, and it was a nice day, what have you, nothing really happening. I don't think people are necessarily returning from their vacation at 12 noon on Sunday, but from traveling south from Lafayette and Route 1 to Massaponax, it was bumper-to-bumper traffic trying to, they thought they were avoiding the traffic on Route 95, but it was all jammed up also. So all I'm saying is I think there's been some good conversation here tonight about the proffers and what is considered maybe responsible governing in this area. I moved down here 3 years ago, and I think it's a great area, but right now the traffic is unbelievable, and if we don't do the proper proffers and the ability to pay for this, I think it's going to fall on the backs of the taxpayer, and I don't think that's right. Thank you.
Suzanne Mears. There's nobody else signed up to speak.
Did anybody that did not sign up wish to speak? Like to speak now? Seeing none, I will close the joint public hearing of the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. Mr. Chair.
Any questions or comments from the Planning Commission? If not, I'll take a motion on this application.
I make the motion to continue to later in the meeting after closed session.
Very good. And do we have a second on that motion? Second. Very good. Noted. We have a second. If you would vote by roll call, Mr. Barnes? Aye. Mr. Bullock? Aye. Ms. Carter?
Aye.
Mr. Medina?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Thompson?
Yeah.
And the chair votes aye.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Skinner.
I'd like to make a motion to follow the lead on the, same as the Planning Commission, please, to take a vote, delay the vote until after closed session.
Any discussion? Call the question.
6 yes.
So that takes us then to a discussion of the proper guidelines, Linda?
Yes. The proffer guidelines is a board policy, so this is not a public hearing. The board may request that the Planning Commission provide input, but ultimately this is a Board of Supervisors policy. May I have the floor computer, please? Again, I just wanted to focus on the aspects of the new law that prompted us to recommend what we're recommending this evening. Again, the concept of not requesting simply having proffer guidelines could be perceived as a request. Also, we need to look at specifically attributable, that the proffer is specifically attributable to that proposed new development. And again, keep in mind, a large part of our proffer guidelines is looking at the costs of public facilities, and any cash proffers are off-site improvements that have more stringent requirements in terms of meeting the Code of Virginia. The current guidelines, they are based on averages. Therefore, we don't believe they meet the test of being specifically attributable. We're looking at a fair share or a proportionate share of new development's cost rather than a specifically attributable share. The new guidance, again, eliminates 3 of the public facilities that are currently in our guidelines, general government, libraries, and solid waste, leaving just the 4 that are specifically in the state code where the Planning Commission and the board can accept proffers associated with schools, transportation, parks, and public facilities. So the cash portion of this is an off-site proffer, and we developed this decision tree that guides somebody through the analysis process. And just to take, for example, a school. We're looking at the public facility school for a new residential development. If that were an age-restricted development, we would answer, is there an impact? We'd say no, and that would be the end of any proffer consideration. But really, that's exactly what we do nowadays under our current policy. We don't expect any impact for schools or any mitigation from a development that is age-restricted. If that development is not age-restricted, we're going to say, yes, there will be an impact to schools. We then looked at that capacity question, and if we feel that that development is going to contribute students above the capacity of that school, then we can move on and consider, well, how are they going to receive a direct and material benefit by that proffer? So we're going to look then at our capital projects, and if there is a school addition in our CIP, we'll know the exact cost of that school addition and how many seats that school addition will accommodate, and we'll be able to do the calculation and determine what that specific impact is associated with the development. If we determine that there is capacity, that's the end of the discussion there as well. Any proffer would be considered unreasonable if there is capacity. So the first rezoning comes along and it has 20 students over capacity. The next project comes along with that same school and it adds another 20 students, and then another 20 students with the next rezoning. So for each of those rezonings, the county could accept a cash proffer to offset the impact associated with those students over capacity. Then the addition to that school is built, and it handles an additional capacity of 100 seats. So suddenly the county has capacity in that school. So the next rezoning that comes along, the county could not expect any sort of offset or mitigation associated with that school. So it is going to, the way the law is written, it's going to be unfair in that regard. No longer will we be able to take the approach where we look at every residential rezoning as having a cumulative impact. Eventually, there are going to be enough students that come along within that school district that a new school is going to be needed. And guidelines are set up so that we're looking at a per capita cost associated with those impacts. The way that this is structured, certain projects are going to come along, there's going to be excess capacity, and there is no ability for the county to accept a proffer. Other cases, they'll come along and they will have nudged over capacity, and at that point in time, the county would be able to accept a proffer.
Question on that, please?
Yes.
Okay, you gave an example, Mr. Chair. Is that okay?
Mr. Skinner, yes.
Thank you, sir. I apologize. So you've got a proffer that gives us 100 seats over. We know 60 of them are already taken. Okay, a company comes in and has 41 students. Do they only pay one student for one student?
That's where we're reading
Okay.
it, is we'd be looking at the one student.
And again, this is what Mr. Yakubowski talked about earlier, I think. I don't know what the General Assembly was thinking of. Because if you could take a 20-year project, and we'll talk about Alexandria Crossing, that has 2,000 homes or something of that at 2,200. And you have a developer that comes in with 100 homes, and he's going to develop that. He gets approved the day after Alexandria gets across. So they've taken up all the capacity. Now 100 homes comes in, and he's got to pay for what in the future Alexandria Crossing is going to do over the 20-year period. And I had to tell you something. I don't know. I'm sorry, but we're supposed to have smarter people. And I guess the real question that bothers me is, does the General Assembly really understand what the intent of their new law was? Because I don't think they do. And I had a chance to talk to Senator Stewart about these proffers. And I don't know if people who pass this bill actually realize what they're doing. And if they're talking about fairness, and they're talking about, and I'm not wanting, this ain't you, I'm just really upset the fact that people down in Richmond just made this choice, and I don't know what it was for, but, you know, we had a gentleman come up and talk about transportation. Well, the only way that we get transportation is through our proffers, okay, and is it reasonable? Well, you know, the state doesn't give us a lot. Mr. Yakubowski's mentioned this already, FAMPO and stuff of this nature. We just don't get a lot of help from that. Money's going to 17. Money's going to Stafford a lot. They've got money to Fredericksburg City. So what are we supposed to do as Spotsylvania County? And I really mean it. I wish that there would be people in the Assembly that could stand up in front of us and tell us what the intent of this law was and how. They don't give us any tools to work with. They give us regulations, mandates, and they don't tell us how we can work with it. And I just think it's ridiculous that some little guy has to come in and pay for a great big development, local people, okay, that actually, like that gentleman that was here before, he takes local businesses and uses them. He takes local electricians, local that, and puts it here, yet we get a company that comes down from outside and using Northern Virginia people, and these small people are paying for it. And I think we need to go back to the Assembly and ask them who can tell us, have them come here and tell us exactly what the intent of this law is, whether it be Senator Reeves or what. But I think we're asked to do an impossible task here. Okay, they've thrown us under the bus is what they've really done. And I don't know who they're doing it for, whether they're doing it for the big builders or what. But, you know, the folks need, the people that come here that tell us that we have transportation problems need to go down to Richmond and ask them why they're not supporting your localities down here with funding to do that. And again, I'm sorry, it's not directed at you, it's directed at the Assembly down there that really, I don't know where they're thinking or what they're doing on this thing, but this is almost an impossible task to solve the problems for our citizens here while still being under the guideline of the General Assembly that they don't have to fix the problem, they caused the problem. So, like I said, it's unfair for a small guy. There's got to be some way that we go back and ask the General Assembly to review this, because somebody who's building over 20 years
Mr. Skinner,
gets a free ride.
Maybe we should send a letter to the General Assembly or a resolution, because we're not, we all agree with you, but we're not getting anywhere.
I'm just listening to this stuff tonight, and it's totally...
Right, so maybe a resolution, later we can come up with something to the Assembly.
I don't even think that'll work.
Mr. Spula.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is kind of a for instance, and I'm not being facetious, but it'll sound somewhat facetious. We've got two projects come before the boards, and the school capacity is 100, and each project is going to show 99, and they're both coming before us at the same time. Neither one of them is going to pay a penny, right, in proffers? According to the way this is explained, if my understanding is correct. But we both know that at that time, we're going to have a cumulative effect of way overpopulation of the schools.
Yeah, we've actually come up with all sorts of crazy scenarios of what ifs, and we don't have answers to most of them at this point. We're just, as they come along, we're going to have to figure these out. But you're right, there can be some crazy scenarios that happen.
And I just point this out so the public understands the frustration of this whole process that's been foisted upon us by incompetence at higher government. It's just totally frustrating. It goes against everything that I thought I was elected to do. Thank you.
Mr. Trampy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You and I have both mentioned previously the possibility of impact fees. We're only allowed to do that for transportation, but I think with this new law, it becomes even more important to look at something which is not arbitrary and is not voluntary. And I think what you've mentioned and what Mr. Benton mentioned about special service districts is along the same lines as let's take the arbitrariness out of this. So I'd like staff to brief us at a future meeting on what would be needed to pass transportation impact fees. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I'd like, Mr. Chair, please.
nice.
I'd like to add that to him. No, I'll be nice. I think we ought to ask the Assembly to look at not only impact fees for transportation, but all these three other areas.
And you know, I've said for 4 years now that I think we should put a mandatory service district across all, get rid of proffers altogether, and there's a fixed rate, a special service district, every pays the same, there's no negotiation. And again, I think county attorneys looked into that for us a little bit, and I think we might get some discussions on it a little bit later this evening. But I agree, we need a comprehensive look at impact fees, service district fees, and because at least until the General Assembly fixes the proffer issue that's on the table, we're probably not going to get many proffers. So, any other comments? Mr. Yakubowski.
Thank you. Mr. Skinner, what you need to do is call the General Assembly a name, because you actually do get their attention when you do that. But I will tell you, I got good feedback, because, and it's not the name, and perhaps it was a little bit over the line, because I don't think that anybody is ill-intentioned. I think, though, that what they have done is stupid. And I don't think that they understand the ramifications, as Wanda had just pointed out. There are so many scenarios. As I'm sitting up here, I'm coming up with so many scenarios of what could happen, and there's no answer for it. So the point of legislation should be to fix a problem to make it better, not to make it even worse. And the problem that I have with all of this is, number one, we are not consulted whatsoever. It's not very difficult to pick up the phone or to set up a meeting or to come here and sit and tell us, this is the idea that I have for some legislation to fix an issue that is happening in the state. And I'm sure some people were abusing the proffer system. We weren't. We actually, I think, have a great relationship with our developers and our builders, hence the committee that was put together to come up with the new proffers. We were engaging. I've never talked to a developer or a builder who has said, I refuse to pay my fair share. Never. What that fair share is up for discussion, obviously. But I think that we have actually come up with the data behind why the numbers exist. And then to have the General Assembly come in with no notification, no discussion, no help, no input from us whatsoever, and just say this is what's going to happen. It's always very confusing to me that when you have a piece of legislation that is passed, that it takes a team of lawyers months to figure out what that actually means. Why is it that difficult? It shouldn't be that difficult, but yet here we are, and that it is that difficult. So I think that our residents really need to understand something, is that whatever actions that we take on these public hearings tonight and our proffer guidelines are not because we don't want proffers, we don't want new growth to pay its way. We simply have our hands tied. We just can't do it. So, you know, I'm sure some people will be upset that we do it, but we are trying to stay within the law that was passed to make sure that the county doesn't get sued, which I think is our primary responsibility. So when it comes down to, you know, even under the current guidelines, apparently the General Assembly doesn't think that new residents add to general government, libraries, or solid waste. That to me is just, it doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. Why pull those three out? Why not come up with a better system of having a service district that we know exactly what those numbers are? When it comes to impact fees, Mr. Trampy, I know that Stafford had tried them up on 17, and I'm not sure, I just remember it was a headache, and a lot of people didn't like them. And so I don't know if it really went anywhere, not to say that we shouldn't do it, but just learn from what they had done and perhaps implement it in a better way. Because when it comes down to it, if proffers are taken away from us, bonds really are the only other way, as opposed to a tax increase, to pay for the costs that are associated with growth. So I want our residents to know that it's not us that are doing these things. We're trying to follow the law that has been passed down to us. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mrs. Bueller.
This is kind of a closing comment. You know, we all complain about the Dillon rule. It's something that we've all learned to live by. I think we're all going to start complaining now about the Reeves rule.
All right, so I think that was the last comment.
This is just a matter, again, for board consideration. So if you want to continue on and move it past the closed session, you can certainly do so.
Yeah, so we don't have to take an action on it right now at all. All right, so I think we've reached the end here. So we want to go into closed meeting? Are you going to read them both in separately?
I am. I'm going to read them both in, and we'll have a vote separately, yes. First, I'll go ahead and read the board in. This is a closed meeting resolution. Whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn into closed meeting for consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by the public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, specifically Virginia Code Section 15.2 2303.4, which goes into effect July 1st, 2016, and legal issues related thereto. And whereas pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2 3711A7, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors does hereby authorize discussion of the aforestated matters.
Call the question.
Six yes.
I will now read the Planning Commission into closed session. This is your closed meeting resolution. Whereas the Spotsylvania County Planning Commission desires to adjourn into closed meeting for consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by the public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, specifically Virginia Code Section 15.2 2303.4, which goes into effect July 1st, 2016, and legal issues related thereto. And whereas pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2 3711A7, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Planning Commission does hereby authorize discussion of the aforestated matters.
Have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Barnes? Aye. Mr. Bullock? Aye. Ms. Carter?
Aye.
Mr. Medina?
Aye.
Mr. Smith? Aye. Mr. Thompson?
No.
Chair votes aye.
We're in closed meeting, and that will convene in the HR department conference.
Open meeting resolution. This is going to be for the board. Whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2 3712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this board that such a closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors hereby returns to open meeting and certifies by roll call vote that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion to convene into closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Mr. Skinner?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Mr. Trampy?
Aye.
Mr. Spula?
Aye.
Mr. Jakubowski?
Aye.
And chair votes aye.
This will be the return to open meeting resolution for the Planning Commission. Whereas the Spotsylvania County Planning Commission has convened in a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote in accordance with the provisions of the Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Virginia Code Section 2.23712D requires a certification by this commission that such a closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now therefore be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Planning Commission hereby returns to open meeting and certifies by roll call vote that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion to go into closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Mr. Burns. Mr. Bullock.
Aye.
Mrs. Carter.
Aye.
Mr. Medina.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Thompson. Chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Yep, let me get to it. So in the first application, CA 16-0001, amend zoning ordinance, chapter 23-4.6, the chair at this point would take a motion on the matter.
Mr. Chairman, I move that for recommendation for approval for CA 16-001.
Do I have a second? Roll call vote, Mr. Burns. Aye. Mr. Bullock.
Aye.
Mrs. Carter.
Aye.
Mr. Medina.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Thompson. The chair votes aye. On the second application, CPA 16-0002, comprehensive plan amendments, take a motion on the matter.
A motion to approve.
Do I have a second? Mr. Burns.
Aye.
Mr. Bullock.
Aye.
Mrs. Carter.
Aye.
Mr. Medina.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Thompson. Chair votes aye.
So on, for the board on zoning amendment CA 16-0001, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Any discussion? Call the question.
Six yes.
On comprehensive plan amendment CPA 16-0002, do we have a motion? You want to make a motion?
Motion approved.
We'll go with your making a motion. Yeah. Any comment? Call the question.
Six yes.
So next item is the Proffer Guidelines Resolution. Do we have any discussion or comment?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to table this for 2 weeks till the next meeting.
Any discussion on that? Call the question.
Six yes.
Do you have any other business?
One, I don't believe we have any other business tonight for the Planning Commission.
Wanda?
One, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm just packing up.
We don't have any other.
We do not have anything else.
I take that as a no. I guess for the Planning Commission, we can motion to adjourn, is that correct? If I could have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Burns. Mr. Bullock. Ms. Carter.
Aye.
Mr. Medina.
Aye.
Mr. Smith. Mr. Thompson. Chair votes aye.
I'd like to thank the Planning Commission for coming.
Thank you.
Okay. Does the board have anything else to discuss? Any other comments? Mr. Skinner?
I know it may not go, but I would like to take the opportunity to send our proffer guidelines up to Senator Stewart, please. He'd offered to forward it to the Attorney General's office just to take a look at as far as the formulas. Maybe the data will be different, but at least the formula we use, since we'll look at local district data, vice county-wide data, or statewide data, and that's the intent. So hopefully if we get it back, we get it back. If not, we can go forward at the next meeting.
Any other comments, questions? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Call the question.